I grew up in Pennsylvania, a place where the smell of fresh pies and the clatter of horse hooves from buggies wove themselves into my childhood memories. Here, the Amish are everywhere. Like a slow heartbeat in a noisy age, I've always held them in special regard, a steadfast community that seems unwilling to bow to the temptations of modern life. Every week I stop by their farmer's market to buy simple things, produce, cold cuts, a fresh-baked loaf and something money can buy, the calm that comes from brushing up against a different way of life. A friend in the countryside who lives next to an Amish community told me they do business fairly and help one another without keeping score. When he needs an extra hand, they show up. When they need a ride, he's glad to drive. Over time, quiet respect turns into friendship. What surprises me most is that they hardly ever talk about religion with the English, what they call the rest of us. It isn't coldness, it's a soft boundary, like a curtain drawn between private life and the noise outside. Watching them, I better understand the teaching to be in the world, but not of it. They live among us, work with their hands, sell simple goods, fix a roof, build a table of fragrant wood, yet keep their own inner rhythm. In a rushing crowd, they walk slowly and steadily, as if each step were a prayer. And from the few but deep encounters I've had, I realize this. It is their silence, not sermons, that speaks most powerfully about the faith and order they choose to live by. The faith and way of life of the Amish appear like a fine but resilient guiding thread, running through even the smallest decisions of their everyday lives. If it had to be distilled into a single sentence, it would be, in the world, but not of the world. They choose to interpret faith through practice, through habits repeated until they become the architecture of the community, rather than through words or public debate. The way they reject violence is the first and strongest proof. No military service, no weapons, not even endorsing violent self-defense. Forgiveness, to them, is not a ceremonial flourish, but a moral reflex. They teach their children that revenge only multiplies suffering, while patience and prayer open the way to peace. For that reason, the Amish way of life creates a different kind of spiritual climate, where anger struggles to take root and hatred finds no language in which to spread. The second principle is honoring manual labor as a form of service. In the cycles of planting, harvesting, carpentry, baking, sewing, they find a rhythm that helps mend people from the fragmentation of the industrial age. The flour-dusted hands of the baker, the scent of fresh wood from the carpenter, the straight rows under the morning sun, these are both economy and spiritual discipline. Work becomes a bridge between faith and reality. Every sturdy chair, every evenly risen loaf is a concrete prayer with shape and weight, not a hazy concept. Precisely because they esteem labor, the Amish limit the encroachment of technology into private life. They do not deny every invention. They are practical enough to use machinery or electricity at work when truly necessary, as long as those tools do not slip into the home, the place they regard as the sanctuary of a slow rhythm of prayer, of face-to-face conversation. This creates an almost invisible yet highly effective boundary line. Technology serves people in labor, but is not allowed to rule relationships within the family. When night falls, the room isn't flooded by screen light. People talk, read scripture, play simple instruments. That stillness helps the important values return to the center: patience, listening, and gratitude. Accompanying this technology boundary is the aesthetics of simplicity. The Amish dress in solid colors with modest cuts. Women don't wear makeup, men don't show off, and the whole community avoids flaunting wealth. This philosophy is not just an aesthetic convention. It also restrains pride and rivalry to things they believe erode a community from within. When a dress or a hat is no longer a personal manifesto, but the language of a shared way of life, the wearer is relieved of the burden of having to impress and can focus on becoming kind and useful. Living simply is also how they keep the cost of life low, thereby increasing their ability to support one another. And indeed, community is the heartbeat of the Amish. They do not leave anyone alone in sickness. Medical finances are shared by the whole village. Those who lose a home have a new one because dozens, hundreds of hands build together. Barn raisings, the whole village building a structure, are not only labor events, but social rites that reinforce the belief that we belong to one another. When a child is born, when an elder grows weak, when harvests are hard, the entire community adjusts its rhythm to fill the gaps. In that value system, competition is no longer a motor, but something to be restrained. They encourage diligence and quality, but refuse the showy race that leads to division. One point that often confuses outsiders is their religious quietness. The Amish rarely debate theology with those outside the community, not because they are indifferent, but because they believe life is the most persuasive sermon. They do not stand on the podium of the square, but in the field in the wood shop by the family table. Their voice is the evenly risen loaf the buggy repaired with care, the apology spoken when needed, the act of forgiveness carried out by feet walking to the one who caused harm. That restraint of words keeps them from spiritual pride while protecting their inner frontier from the endless arguments of the world. The Amish way of life is also anchored by the rhythm of worship at home. They gather in one another's houses, read scripture, sing hymns, share simple meals. There is no dazzling stage, no amplified sound, only familiar faces and an atmosphere of one big family. By bringing worship back into ordinary space, they resist the artificial split between sacred hours and ordinary hours, reminding one another that faith must soak into the rhythm of each day. When all those threads are woven together, nonviolence, manual labor, a technology boundary, the aesthetics of simplicity, mutual care and community. Worship at home, we see a coherent cultural tapestry. Not a single thread is decoration. Each one functions to keep the soul warm and preserve moral order in chaotic times, of course. The Amish also have their limits and challenges. They are not perfect symbols, but their appeal lies in their unity. What they believe is how they live, and how they live is repeated every day until it becomes temperament. And when a community collectively maintains those habits over many generations, faith is no longer a story of fleeting inspiration, but becomes an architecture in which every small gesture, every button, every wooden will turns in the same direction, toward peace, humility, and love. If you put the Amish and the Mennonites in the same frame, you'll see the communities that both spring from the Anabaptist tradition. Both uphold believers' baptism, nonviolence, simple living, and a communal spirit, yet they choose to different social paths. The Amish are more insular, scattered across farms, worshiping in members' homes, keeping a slow pace and inward discipline within the community. The Mennonites separated from the Amish in the early 18th century and are more open to the world. They gather in church buildings and adopt many aspects of modern life, including technology, to serve daily living and work. Among core similarities, the most visible difference lies in the boundary with modernity. The Amish draw a clear line around the family. Technology may be used for labor when needed, but it is not brought into the home to disrupt stillness and face-to-face relationships. The Mennonites, by contrast, accept technology more broadly in daily life, education, ministry, and media, while still striving to keep a spirit of simplicity and service. This makes it easier for Mennonites to engage in communication, education, and public civic roles, while the Amish maintain internal self-sufficiency and a classic pace of life. Another axis of comparison is the practice of public witness. Both respect historic confessions that emphasize professing the faith, but Mennonites often express this through outward-facing ministry, education, and community activities. The Amish lean toward witness by life, a solidly built wooden table, a straight plowed field, an act of forgiveness in tragedy, quiet signs in place of discourse. In church discipline, both are strict, yet the Amish more often use measures that maintain a closed order, while the Mennonites, living more openly, both keep discipline and interact with society's legal, medical, and educational institutions. In short, you can picture the Amish as a kind of monasticism in the world, preserving a distinct rhythm to protect interior order, and the Mennonites as a translator between two worlds, carrying Anabaptist values into public space using the language and tools of the age. Both branches seek to live honestly with their faith. They simply choose different strategies in the face of the tide of modernity. The short season of Satan hypothesis appears as a lens explaining why the Amish draw unusual boundaries with the modern world. In this view, history has entered a dark stretch, a short but fierce season when the temptations of power, vanity, and the allure of technology surge strongly enough to mislead the human heart. If we truly are in such a season, the reasonable response is not to argue more, but to withdraw with discipline, safeguard the soul, keep the community steady, and raise hedges around family life. Within that framework, the decision to stop at the industrial threshold, often pictured around the year 1800, ceases to be backwardness and becomes a theological choice. Technology may serve labor, but must not shape the soul. Machines can belong in the shop, not at the dinner table. Conveniences may assist the harvest, but must not replace the cadence of conversation between parents and children. The harsher the short season, the clearer the fences need to be. This hypothesis also explains Their reticence about public evangelism when the world is noisy and polarized. The Amish believe the most eloquent witness is a whole life radical forgiveness, honest work, simplicity, and unity rather than discourse. Living as one believes becomes a common language enough for outsiders to see and weigh, while the community avoids the pride of argument. Of course, this is a bold interpretation. Linking a historical threshold to eschatological belief is always more symbolic than empirical. The Amish are not absolutely uniform either. Each ordning may stretch certain rules, but the hypothesis persuades by its internal coherence. Set beside their practice as the technology boundary, the aesthetics of simplicity, nonviolence, home worship, mutual aid, we see a spiritual defensive architecture that fits together joint by joint. What remains is a question for each of us. If we also feel the world crowding faster, growing more chaotic, are we ready to raise small fences, a screen-free dinner, a half hour of manual work, a decision to forgive as stakes against the flood for the soul? For a season may be short, but its consequences are long, and only loving discipline is sturdy enough to carry us through it. Reaching the end of this journey, what remains with me is not a perfect portrait of the Amish, but a sense of a living architecture built from small choices repeated over and over, as enduring as the grain in a table they craft. Nonviolence is not a slogan, but a moral reflex trained by real forgiveness. Manual labor is not just a trade, but the breathing rhythm of self-respect. Simplicity is not about lack, but a strategy to steady the heart against rivalry and vanity. Community is not welfare, but a covenant that we belong to one another. And the technology boundary is not fear of progress, but a resolve not to let conveniences colonize the soul. Whether or not you agree with the short season of Satan hypothesis, the consistency between belief and practice among the Amish remains a rare mirror. Believe something, then arrange life for it, not by a day's burst of enthusiasm, but by habits carried through generations. In a world accelerating, where new notifications land faster than a heartbeat, their quiet lesson is this: some values only grow in slowness. The presence at the dinner table, an hour of manual work, an apology spoken in time, a decision to forgive even when it's hard. We may not become Amish, and don't need to. Every community has its own history, challenges, and calling. But anyone can try to set a small fence for the soul, a screen-free dinner each day, one day a week off social media, a mutual aid fund for family and friends, a commitment to read and meditate on a short passage of scripture or another text that stirs goodness before starting work. Those stakes won't make the world less chaotic overnight, but like levees shielding seedlings from floods, they let dignity and kindness take root. In closing, I don't want to issue a moral command. I simply invite you to try one small change this week. Then watch how your rhythm and relationships shift. Perhaps what you've long sought, peace, focus, a sense of belonging, doesn't lie in one more convenience added, but in one old distraction removed. And who knows, out of that cleared space, a coherent life may begin to sprout, quietly and steadily. 24-hour challenge, no fawning, no tech after 9 p.m. You in?